Hello my beautiful watchers and welcome to the second episode of the Dom Reviews You, a little side project I'm doing where I review the things submitted to me by my beautiful watchers. It turns out I miscalculated last time. I actually had well over 800 submissions, so that's moderately more terrifying. Before we jump back into this, I just want to remind everyone that I am not an expert on anything, and especially not the stuff I'm about to give feedback on. I don't have an English degree, I don't have any formal training in teaching or constructive feedback, I barely have a film degree. I'm just a guy who complains about adaptations on YouTube and, more often than not, doesn't even bother putting on pants when I film. Please take my criticisms for what they are worth, i.e. very little. Oh, and just another quick warning / apology, this episode might seem a little inconsistent throughout. Sometimes I'm going to be addressing the creator who submitted something and offering ways to improve it, and sometimes I'm just going to be talking about the submission in the way I usually review movies. This is due to me writing this episode over a long period, forgetting what format I was utilising, and being too lazy to re-script it when I noticed the issue. Okay, first up we have Turnip by Philip Nyquist Christ. Sorry, you guys remember that I always pronounce names wrong, right? Turnip is a short animation about a living scarecrow that appears to shun the affections of a bird that lands on him, but after believing another scarecrow has been installed nearby and being disappointed that it's of too crude a design to be good company, finds new appreciation in his avian companion. That's pretty much all there is to it. It's only 2.5 minutes long and there's no dialogue. The artwork in this is pretty good for a stylistic animation. I especially liked the beautiful art paper backgrounds. The only real drawback to this is the music that Philip chose for the background is an ancient and rather degraded vinyl recording of a song from the 1940s. A bold artistic choice, but I found that the constant crackling and popping began to grate on my nerves after the first minute or so. The whole thing is just a little bit too long for that particular music choice in my opinion. Falters and Falsehoods by Shadowpaw. An original story published online and currently 3 chapters in, Falters and Falsehoods seems to be set in a world, either our future or an alternative world co-inhabited by humans and mutants of all shapes and sizes. Actually, co-inhabit is probably the wrong word. Apparently the country they live in is divided by a huge wall to keep the humans and the Macht, as they're referred to, completely separate. According to the blurb, the story centers around 6 people who are going to be thrown together by a twist of fate, which explains why each chapter so far has had a different protagonist. The first chapter pulls one of those Alfred Hitchcock-style switcheroos where you think a character is going to be the hero, but it's not because they get killed off, and it was a pretty well executed misdirection. The writing in general is also reasonably good, a tad rambly in places, and Shadowpaw has a bit of a ways to go in regards to making his dialogue sound natural, but I see a lot of potential here. There's a spark of what could become real talent. However, I do feel compelled to warn Shadowpaw that if my suspicion is correct and his plan is to have 6 narrators sharing the story, that's going to become really hard to pull off because that requires him to work in equal development and personal arcs for all of them in a single book. I mean, George Martin can get away with it, but that's George motherfucking R. Martin. Unless you think you're that good, it might be better to restrict yourself to just 1 or 2 protagonists, especially when first starting out. Show don't tell obviously cannot apply to books because everything is tell, but there's still a good way of imparting information and a bad way. The reason I bring this up is Shadowpaw is clearly keen to establish that the second character he introduces is something of a badass, but the way he goes about it is for everyone he encounters to say, "Oh hey, you're that total badass," and the chapter ends without him having done anything even remotely impressive. I know there's time to include this sort of thing later, but first impressions are important when it comes to this sort of thing. Another heads up I want to give is the current format you're writing it in is not going to be sustainable for a full book if you want the end result to be halfway readable. The problem is I'm only calling what I read chapters because that's what the website referred to them as. Each one contains barely enough words to fill 1 or 2 pages of an actual book. They're all about the length of a short prologue. Now, very short chapters aren't unheard of in the literary world, but in this case, combined with the multiple narrators, it's resulting in switching characters way too fast and way too often. I know it's tempting to rush the intros and give us the bare minimum to establish what these characters are about because you have 6 to get through, but you have to give the reader a chance to get to know these guys a little better, or you're going to end up with the book equivalent of Suicide Squad where the shit's given about the well-being of the protagonists are in the negative figures. So yeah, consider reducing the cast and increasing the chapter length, and I think this could turn into something pretty good eventually. Oh Death by Hayley Callahan. Oh Death is an old college project by YouTuber known as Tricksterbell. She reviews feminism in folklore and the art theory in Disneyland, which FYI you might want to check out if you're interested in that sort of thing. It struck me as kind of a modernized retelling of The Appointment in Samara, an ancient fable about a servant who saw death herself in the marketplace, mistook a gesture of hers as an act of aggression, and, in a panic, borrowed his master's horse to flee to the neighbouring city of Samara to hide from her. Shortly later, his master ran into Death as well and asked her what her beef with his servant was, and Death responded that it had actually been a look of surprise, as she hadn't expected to see this man in Baghdad, as she had an appointment with him in Samara that very evening. In a similar scenario, the lead of the film encounters Death and proceeds to inadvertently cause his own demise in a way he never would have done had he not encountered her. Odeth mixes in some Greek mythology into the tale by making the character of Death one of the fates who spin and snip the threads of destiny that control human lives. Her involvement in the lead's demise also seems a little more intentional and malevolent than in the original myth. This film actually looks really good. For a college project, which is to say it actually looks terrible, but it's leagues better than the garbage I was making back at uni, and before you ask, absolutely not, you will never find this stuff online. Odeth's main drawback is the lead actor is really, really bad, just terrible. He mumbles his way through the whole movie in a hesitant monotone drone that saps the suspense out of what might otherwise have been a halfway creepy story.
Okay, this is ridiculous. You're a rational guy. You haven't been scared of the boogeyman since you were 6. All that has happened is that you talked to a pretty girl and ruined it for your best flirting.
It's somehow made worse by the fact that Haley is a pretty decent actor, so their scenes together bring it into even more stark, inescapable relief. There's also a few leveling issues with the score, with the music often crescendoing at just the wrong moment and drowning out dialogue that's essential for foreshadowing the rest of the plot.
The way she told it, instead of 3 fates, there was only one. She was the one to bend the thread of life, weave the life for its allotted time, and cut it.
Honestly though, that's kind of exactly what college movies are for, figuring out stuff like this so you're better at it later. I rather suspect Haley made this in part so she'd have an excuse to play a creepy as fuck character, and she looks like she's having a lot of fun doing it, so fair play to her. Shadow of Me, written by... Okay, with my track record, there's no way I'm going to be able to pronounce those names right, so I'm not going to try, sorry guys. Shadow of Me is a very short webcomic on Facebook about a homosexual man attempting to deal with the guilt he feels after his recently ex-boyfriend, who he constantly cheated on and verbally and physically abused, goes missing after a car wreck. He is metaphorically, and possibly literally, haunted by what he did to him, and after failing to find out what happened to him, appears to suffer a mental breakdown and talks to the... memory of him? It's not really made clear how much of this is real and how much is purely in this guy's head, I'm guessing by design. He's called out for everything he did, and despite his claims to feeling remorse, his ghost ex is having none of it and tells him he just wants to make himself feel better, but it is no longer his ex's responsibility to make him whole again. It was very interesting to see a story about a toxic relationship told from the perspective of the abuser instead of the victim, and the potential moral issues with that are negated by the fact that the comic makes zero attempts to make him sympathetic or justify his behaviour. It pulls no punches in regards to showing how undeserving he currently is for redemption, and I deeply approve of the overall message that victims are not obligated to forgive their abusers just because they apologise, and how they must not believe it is their responsibility to make such people feel better about themselves. It also illustrates when something is an apology and when it's actually an excuse pretending to be one, and the difference between being truly remorseful for hurting someone and seeking forgiveness only to relieve guilt. For these reasons, I'm very glad this comic exists, however, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the things about it I wasn't as impressed with. Now, I feel absolutely wretched for saying this because I'm pretty sure the person who sent me this and gave me permission to review it said he was the illustrator, but I think the weakest part of this comic has to be the artwork. I want to stress that I'm not saying it's bad. The colouring is good, the dynamic angles of several of the panels are presented well, and movement is skillfully implied. No, the issue I have with it is it's just so incredibly generic looking. This artist desperately needs to put down his copy of How to Draw Manga Volume 1 and find his own style, because his talents are currently being wasted drawing everything in a way that makes it indistinguishable from what you can see on 500,000 DeviantArt pages. I also personally would have liked to have had some sort of resolution in regards to what actually happened to the ex-boyfriend, for the audience at least, if not for the main character. It's all very well showing that the memory of him chose to move on and walk away from this toxic person, but if the real version of the guy crawled off and died somewhere in the woods, or survived somehow but ended up in another abusive relationship, it kind of takes a bit of the punch out of the story, I think. I was also slightly confused by the first page, where it's revealed that the reason the young man crashed his car in the first place is because he was distracted by his hands starting to glow, which... yeah, no, I have no idea what's going on there. All in all though, like I said, I'm still very much in favour of this comic, and I think it's got a hell of an important message, even if its delivery of it wasn't perfect. When I Squint, It Looks Like Christmas by Naomi Norbez. When I Squint, It Looks Like Christmas is a semi-interactive online story about a short-sighted homeless girl who is magically transported to an unusual land by an evil wizard. It seems to be aimed towards a younger audience, but seems pretty well written. It's got a strong Wizard of Oz, Alice in Wonderland vibe with the former's basic setup and the latter's tendency to go off on pointless but entertaining tangents. I was amused that the first person the young protagonist encountered was a talking bush, because while it was initially grumpy, it quickly befriends her, because it seems this author has accepted the universal truth that hedges are not scary. At first glance, I thought this might have been more of a text-adventure game than a story, but I quickly noticed that multiple choice options were few and far between, and a quick replay of the first chapter revealed no real difference to the story as a result of choosing different choices, so it seems to be more of a gimmick to make the young reader feel involved and hold their attention than an attempt to be truly interactive. I don't really have any feedback on this one because all in all, it's already pretty competent. The story didn't really hold my attention for too long because I'm a grumpy old man, not a precocious child, but I can see it doing well with its intended audience. And my number one favourite submission of the Dom Reviews You episode 2 is Cliffside by Liam Vickers. Yeah, it's another animated pilot. They won't all be, I swear, but this submission kind of blew me away, so I couldn't not make it my top pick. Cliffside is the story of a young man named Waylon living out his immature, idealized fantasies of being an outlaw while living in a sparsely populated Old West town that happens to be surrounded by demonic entities bent on their destruction. I hope I have your attention now because it is just as interesting a concept as it sounds. A final reminder that I am not speaking from a position of great experience here. This is just my opinion on stuff. Perhaps an animation expert would scoff at this and say, "My goodness, this is a terrible use of color." You see, that kind of proves my point. Anyways, I love this pilot. Cliffside is fucking hilarious. The comedic timing of some of these jokes has to be seen to be believed. Whoop. For a show that was apparently created by a single animator, it also looks spectacular, combining 2 and 3D art styles seamlessly in places. The soundtrack is also of a highly professional quality, complementing each scene, transition, and the beats of the jokes, both verbal and visual, perfectly. Liam mentioned that one of his influences in making this was Gravity Falls, and I can definitely see that, at least where the art style and humour is concerned. This is just a matter of personal preference, but because I adore fast-paced comedies and exceptionally well-timed visual jokes, I actually think Cliffside might be superior to Falls in some ways. I know that's a hell of a controversial statement, but just give it a watch, you'll see what I mean. The visuals walk the very fine line between funny dark and too dark, but every time I thought it was going to go too far, gosh darn it, it just found a way to bring it back and make me laugh despite myself.
I'm going to eat you now.
Cut it out! I'm 2-Bit Jerry, the most dastardly outlaw there is! I once shot a sheriff just because I was grumpy from shooting sheriffs all day.
Really?
Yes.
I was kind of worried that I was going to start finding one of the leads annoying after a while, because she's one of those "the joke is she never gets excited by anything" type characters that I've remarked in the past are starting to become a little too popular at the moment, but she did eventually get angry about something, and the fact that she'd been like that up until that moment actually made it twice as funny, so I gotta say, fair play, that was a good use of a character like that.
What in tarnation is going on?
Oh god, she's gone southern.
I'm so tempted to show you guys a bunch of other jokes from this, but I really want you to go and check it out for yourself. The link will be at the top of the list in the video description.
You didn't learn a thing.
Okay, confession time. By right, Cliffside should not have been able to feature here, as it was emailed to me far past the deadline I set for submitting things, but I wanted to do it so much I accepted it anyway, which means to keep things fair, I really should be doing this for everyone. So, submissions are once again open. I may also be factoring in that I'm never going to be able to get through 800 submissions anyway, so excluding newer viewers from having an equal shot at being included would just be mean at this point. If you would like to be featured in the next The Dom Reviews You, please email me a link to your work online. No direct file transfers, and be sure to include written permission for me to feature it in a video in your message. Also, if you're going to send me a link to YouTube, please don't forget to set it to unlisted or public. A few people missed out on a chance to be in this one because of that. Thank you for joining me, my beautiful watchers. Please remember that a like button click a day helps keep the broken algorithm away, and I will hopefully see you in the next video. Hello again, my beautiful watchers. I just wanted to take this opportunity to give you a quick reminder that there's a wonderful website called Patreon that's been allowing online producers to actually make a living doing what they do, since apparently YouTube's decided that they shouldn't anymore. Basically, they offer the chance to pledge a certain amount of money per month or per video in exchange for various rewards offered by the creator. There's a variety of stuff you can earn by becoming one of my patrons, including early access to all videos and taking part in that survey you see at the start of every Lost in Adaptation episode. That's actually a very important part of the process, as I use it to gauge how much I'm going to need to explain about the book and the film before I start comparing them. If you decide to become a higher level contributor, your name will be added to the credits that you're seeing right now, and you'll be given the option to join my private chat room so you can regularly talk with me and other patrons. If you're keen enough to join the topmost tier of patronage, you'll earn the most coveted of all the rewards, the chance to pick a future adaptation to be reviewed by yours truly. However, if right now you are thinking, my goodness the Dom, I can't do that, for you see, I am of the Fremen and we use water as currency here on Arrakis. I mean, you can have some if you really want, but I'm not sure how much use you're going to get out of it. Fear not, it would still be a huge help to me if you were to give that like button the old clickaroo, share this episode on social media with perhaps a little recommendation to your friends to check it out, and subscribe if you've not already. It really helps my channel grow and reach new beautiful watchers. I hope you have a most pleasant day, and I will see you in the next episode.